Thomas hit me up and said, if you could pick a week 4 game to go to right now, which one would you pick? Okay, so for those of you who just don't have the schedule memorized, that's me. We got Ohio State at Notre Dame that week. Thomas, I'm taking your word for that. We've got Florida State at Clemson that week, and Thomas, I know that's the case. And we've got Ole Miss at Alabama. I don't think much of anyone is going to pick Ole Miss at Alabama just right now, unless you're a Rebels fan or a Bama fan. You're just not picking that game over the other two. So I think we need to narrow this down to FSU, Clemson, possible game of the year in the ACC, probable game of the year in the ACC. And also, we can narrow it down to Ohio State at Notre Dame. Remember, even though the Irish fell in that one last year, which was earlier in the year, I think it was week 1, it was a close game. Notre Dame led late in the second half before Ohio State finally pulled away. And just by the way, if you're listening on pod, some other notables, you do have Iowa at Penn State that day. You've got Colorado at Oregon, so you could call that Dion at Oregon. UCLA's at Utah that day. Texas is at Baylor. So a really good week 4 slate of games. Plus, as we all know, if we eat, sleep, and breathe this thing we call college football, there are going to be matchups that aren't even on your radar right now that all of a sudden end up vying for game of the week candidacy come week 4. I don't really know what my answer here is. I beat around the bush that long to tell you I don't really know what my answer here is. I am about 55% leaning towards Florida State Clemson. The last big, I'm trying to make sure this is right. I think the last big ACC game I went to was a Clemson-Florida State game. It was down in Doak. It was in 2015 or 16, and it was a classic, 35-31 final, I think. Clemson won the game. This could be a coronation of sorts, not as a championship situation, not as a playoff situation, but a reemergence situation. Because point blank, no one's taken Florida State seriously on the national scene until they beat Clemson. They'll take them seriously as being a pretty good team. They're not taking them serious as a national contender until they beat Clemson. That's the way it should be. It's fair that way, because we don't have an expanded playoff yet, so you're not going to be able to back your way in all likelihood unless you go through the top dog in the conference. And that top dog's been on top for a long time because people like Florida State and Miami and the like haven't stepped up. Well, you can't do anything about the past, but you can control the here and now. And I'm basically trying to promote the game right now, convince myself. But having said that, if you were to tell me Ohio State and Notre Dame, both undefeated when they play, you know my affinity for South Bend. You know my affinity for the history of this sport. You know that I try and view everything within the lens of cinematography. You know, I picture myself in a movie in a lot of cases when I go to these places because it's the closest that your boy will ever come to being on a movie set. I mean, sure, I make Outer Banks, but that's just a Netflix series, you know? So we're talking about a full-blown movie set here. And I love Notre Dame Stadium. I've only been there once. It was the Georgia game in 2017. Love it. And I would love to see this game. I really hate that they don't let me, as future college football commissioner, control the scheduling apparatus yet. Because if they did, I would divide these games up a little bit more evenly, and we would never have any down weeks. I don't think that exists anyway, but some more casual-minded amongst us would suggest that they do. But we wouldn't have down weeks, and we would, however, not have weeks where 7 of the biggest games in the season all happen simultaneously. So I think I'm going to go by the slimmest of margins to start the season with FSU Clemson. But you could really, really easily talk me off of that.